That is a very human skill to be able to connect with our own creativity. That is a human skill to be able to ritualize moments. That is a human skill. And they remind us of what it means to be human. And we, in these days, we must tether ourselves to human making endeavors, things that make us feel more human, help us remember what it means to be human.
Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I speak with changemakers from all over the world, from every walk of life, who will inspire you to live with zest. I'm your host, Nicole Christina, and my mission is to bring you optimism about aging and help you make full use of the new opportunities that only come at this stage of life. To find out more about this podcast, hop on over to zestfulaging.com. Well, I am very excited about today's conversation. We are going to hear from an artist who developed his own special nature ritual to get through a painful breakup. Schildkret makes what he calls morning altars by gathering stray twigs, flowers, pine cones, and leaves and turning them into beautiful works of art. Morning altar public installations have been commissioned internationally by parks, museums, galleries, cemeteries, and weddings, and a large installation has also been featured at the 9/11 Memorial Plaza in New York City. Welcome to the show, Day.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I am so excited to talk to you. Let's start at the very beginning, and it was a while ago now. I'm wondering if you remember your first morning altar creation.
Yeah, I definitely do. I have actually two creation stories if you'd like to hear them.
Yes.
Okay. I'd say like the original story is that I was 5 years old. And as a little boy, I had a tendency to want to run outside after a rainstorm to my driveway where there were all of these displaced worms, and I would save the worms and I would help them get on little leaves, and I would transport each one to my front lawn, and I would puncture little holes in the ground, and I'd help them kind of find their way back home.
Them.
Yeah, and I had a tendency even at that young age to really see what other folks were stepping on or stepping over. I had a tendency to be able to see the unseen, which were these worms, and I didn't just help them get back into the ground. I actually would decorate every single wormhole with berries and little flower petals and little twigs. And my parents thought this was absolutely adorable. And little did they know, or I know, that actually that was kind of the seed for some much larger movement that's claimed me and has in some ways made ripples across the world. So that's the first origin story, which really started off with wonder and play and
empathy
and great care. Yeah. And great care. Empathy, and also like a willingness to participate in helping a creature find its way back home, which is very much related to how and what I teach these days. I'd say the second origin story happened many years later with my father's death and a massive breakup. And so that story was, I had so much grief and I was really struggling under the amount of loss that I was trying to carry in my day-to-day life. I couldn't work. I really couldn't socialize. I was really struggling because of all of the loss that I was confronting. And I adopted my father's dog at the time, a little miniature schnauzer. And she was the one that got me out of the house. I mean, really, I think if I could just wallow in my grief, I probably would have hermited for a while. and she
Mhm.
needed to go on walks and and do her thing. And so we would go on these early morning dog walks, and I would be holding her with my head pretty much down, lost in thought, and she would be a dog, which is sniffing and curious and doing her, just like wandering about. And one morning, as the story goes, we walked to the top of this hill inside of a park called Wildcat Canyon here in Northern California. And I saw under this tree these beautiful amber colored mushrooms that looked like they were painted with watercolor. And
Mhm.
it was dawn. I mean, it was just like the sun was just rising, and the morning dew was making everything glisten. There was a gentle breeze, and I sat down under that tree in this park. And maybe it was my little boy, my 5-year old, who was kind of arranging the pieces here. But I sat down and I just started to play with those mushrooms, and I created a shape from them, and I started to add eucalyptus bark and eucalyptus caps and a few berries, and about an hour went by, and it felt like it was a minute. And I
Mhm.
looked down, and before me was something incredibly symmetrical and ordered and beautiful and impermanent. And
Mhm.
out of just my heart's grief, I dedicated it to my dad. And
Mhm.
um, and I, for the first time in like 7 months, I realized that something changed. My grief was not weighing me down as it was before that. I felt like I had metabolized the grief a little bit. And so I
Mhm.
challenged myself, could I go back to that same tree and collect new material along the way and create another piece the next day? Actually, the challenge was for 30 days. And so I did. I would go on these long dog walks. We'd collect crow feathers and elderberries and leaves and bark and stone. And I'd sit under that tree. I'd shut my phone off, and I'd just let my hands create and my
Mhm.
imagination wonder. And the thing that I realized in retrospect was that because grief is by its nature disorienting,
Mhm.
and it feel like there's a lot of chaos when you're in the midst of loss. And so what I was doing is I was creating some order, some beautiful order, so that I could remember
Mhm.
there was something, you know,
Mhm.
I could look down and I could realize, I made order just now. I made symmetry. I made balance, and it was doing something profoundly somatic to my body. I don't know if you feel this way when you're around symmetry, but my nervous system relaxed and my mind softened, and I would drop into my body. I would actually start to feel healthier, and it became, in retrospect, a therapy
Mhm.
modality.
It's like a
I made
container for your grief.
Yeah, yeah. It was a container. It was an instrument, and
Mhm.
most importantly, because I'm a word nerd, so I love etymology. The etymology of the word altar, which is what I came to call these morning altars, is altus. It's Latin, which means to raise up. So essentially, I was putting my grief down so that I could raise it up and I could see it as beautiful and I could feel connected to my dad again. And I could feel a sense of, renewal.
Mhm.
And then I didn't want to stop. Those 30 days came and went. And I just, for decades now, this has been a daily practice. I now teach hundreds of people around the world how to bring this modality with their clients or their communities as a healing therapy. And it's become something from me having to manage and work with my own grief, something very private that was really an impetus for me to just come back to myself. And it's transformed into a global movement of people that understand nature and creativity and ritual as essential human therapies to heal, especially in these times that we're living in.
Say more about that day when you're talking about how it's such an instrument for healing, and especially in these times. Can you flesh that out a little bit more?
Sure. We are, I mean, I don't probably have to tell you or your audience that we're in profoundly isolating times and disconnected times and stressful times and overwhelming times. Since the pandemic, there has been an incredible increase, especially among our people in service, helpers and healers and nurses, where there's been a massive increase in depression and suicide and burnout.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we are in a culture that really is having trouble supporting its people. And at its base, because this is where I focus my work in the world, we're profoundly disconnected from nature. And we have a very disconnected understanding as a culture of nature. We think that it's an object instead of a subject, which is much more of an indigenous understanding. Many people are profoundly disconnected from their own innate creativity, not creating enough, not feeling empowered to create.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the people I work with start off by saying, "Well, I'm not an artist; I can't do that." And
Mm-hmm.
there's some disconnection between, thinking that what you make has to be perfect and just playing in the process of creating. And this is such a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful modality because it's just arranging leaves and berries and bark.
Mm-hmm.
But deep down inside, it's profound. I mean, that's the Trojan horse of this practice. It's, a 4-year-old can do it, but I've worked with tens of thousands of people around the world, and specifically, a community that is really that's profoundly connected to and employing this modality is the death and dying community. So I work a
Mm-hmm.
lot with hospice workers and death doulas and grief counselors in order to take this and bring it to their communities and their clients. And then the last thing I'll say is that we're in a time right now where we're starving for meaning. We're
Mm-hmm.
deficient in, and you could see that on the front pages of the newspapers during the pandemic. I mean, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Harvard Review literally had headlines that said, "We need more rituals." And that's
Mm-hmm.
a culture that was experiencing loss and grief, but didn't have mechanisms to remember the importance of life in the presence of loss. And the third aspect of my work is really it's ritual therapy. It's teaching people how to make meaning and how to remember and how to mark moments in life so that we can have better understanding as we proceed, as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. You have a whole book on
I do.
rituals. Yeah.
Hello, goodbye.
Hello, goodbye. Hi, Zesties. Hey, if you're enjoying this episode, I would so appreciate if you would share with just one person, like a family member or a friend who would enjoy and benefit from Zestful Aging podcast. Thank you so much. Talk about hospice workers or death doulas. Give me some examples about how these altars can be used to help people process their
Sure, I'll
grief.
give you a very personal example. My mother is in mid-stage dementia. She lives in a memory care facility in New York. Actually, the introduction of Hello Goodbye is devoted to the moment for the first time when she forgot my name.
Mm,
And the question that underlies the introduction is, what do you do in those moments? Do you just carry on as if nothing happened?
mm,
Um, Sometimes we as people need to feel like we have purpose and we can do something. And yet in those moments, it can feel like you don't know what to do, or you can feel a sense of disempowerment. And so I wrote this chapter, the introduction of the book, which helps to explain what I did in that moment and how ritual really served me, marking a horrible moment in the trajectory of my and her life. But I'll say that because my mom is in memory care, I encounter a lot of aides and nurses. that are in service to my mom and many other folks. And I also, I'm telling you a personal story. I also work with a lot of aides and nurses and hospice workers. But just to give you this little glimpse into my personal life,
Mm-hmm.
um, the population that lives with my mom in this memory care facility, they are, they can't communicate, like talking and processing with words is really, really difficult for most of them, if not all of them. They get overwhelmed very easily. And a lot of the programs that the memory care facility tries to serve the population is highly inappropriate, to be honest with you. They start the day off with like news of the day. I mean, my mother she can't remember my name, let alone like,
Mm-hmm.
why would she want to participate in news? They play
Mm-hmm.
like Jeopardy, they watch Jeopardy, they play word games. I mean, she has so much trouble communicating, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So offering her and the population that lives in the memory care facility an activity where they don't have to talk, they can just move their hands, they can arrange, they can make something with their hands. That's first and foremost a gift to that population. It takes a lot of pressure off. Second of all, the material is already beautiful and it's already interesting textures and colors and smells. It's very sensual. And that also brings more life into that facility. It brings joy, it brings happiness. There's no right way to do it, unlike painting or drawing, where people can feel really overwhelmed by the art expression itself. This is just arranging. You're just creating whatever shapes that you want out of the material itself. And then lastly, I don't know if this is true for necessarily my mother, but because the modality is a meaning making modality, for folks that can respond to this question, it's an opportunity for them to remember something important. And I know in my mom's facility, they have something called memory boxes that live outside of their bedrooms, and they're just photographs and little trinkets of like the life that she lived and who she loved. And memory is something like a garden. It needs to be tended to daily. Even with people that are losing their memories, it's really important for them to at least lean into or touch upon a certain memory. And so these can be, if there's a capacity, maps of meaning and memory. There's opportunities here for folks to remember a person or a place or a time that can weave them back into the meaning of their lives.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about what you're doing and also uh, some of the other projects to help older people with memory that involve AI and how we couldn't be more polar opposite here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have with the dependency and the changes that are coming with AI, we have a real risk of losing our humanity.
Mm-hmm.
I just taught a teacher training this weekend to my students. We just onboarded a new cohort for a 9-month teacher training. And one of them, who's a death doula, she was lamenting to me about how certain hospices are preparing to install robots that will sit at the bedside of a dying person and comfort them as they're dying.
Oh, wow.
Think about that for a second, because without judgment,
Yeah.
it points towards something that is in deep disrepair, which is that at the time of someone's passing, at their transitional moment, we are so disconnected from community, from
Mm-hmm.
village mindedness, from a sense of togetherness as a people, that we don't have the right people to sit at that bedside and honor and be with and support that person through their most important gateway.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I say we're losing our humanity, it's not a concept. There's a real
Mm-hmm.
threat here. And
Wow,
these,
people don't want to do that. We're so death illiterate as a
yeah, we
culture.
are. Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
and so the three pillars I work with, nature, creativity, ritual, are innately human making skills,
Hmm.
right? Like to be able to be in with and connected to nature. That is a skill, that is a very human skill to be able to in some ways connect with our own creativity. That is a human skill. To be able to ritualize moments, that is a human skill. And
Hmm.
they remind us of what it means to be human. Now that changes for each person, but they're all relevant and real. And
Hmm.
we, in these days, we must tether ourselves to human making endeavors, things that make us feel more human, help us remember what it means to be human. It is more important than ever, because the world that we're leaving for the next generations might not know. So we have to, in some ways, like reconnect ourselves so that we can be a guide and a lighthouse for the generations that have yet to come.
Hmm. Mm. I hear your passion. I totally with you. And one thing that comes to mind though is you are spending a lot of time with these rituals, many of which are about loss. And I wonder, do you do anything to kind of compensate for that in your own life in terms of sort of take a day off and, and not be immersed in this world that can be pretty intense?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that like my happy place is very paradoxical. I'm someone who likes to go very deep and very shallow. I like to swim in both ends of the pool. And
Mm-hmm.
so when my students are learning with me, it is, I'm putting as much emphasis on play and imagination and sweetness and humor and all of these things, because
Mm-hmm.
that is equal to the importance of being able to exercise our capacity to grieve and sorrow together and be with the changes that life brings. And so I'd say, my happy place is really oscillating between those two things. And so most of my activities are just a movement. Most of my personal, the ways that I like to be in the world are a movement between those two things. And, I find that, for instance, when I'm in nature, I can move more easily between play and depth, as if those are opposites. I don't even know if they are. Or when I'm making art, when I'm being creative, I can move between playing with possibilities and then also really getting into the depth of the art itself. And so I'd say like that's the healthier place for me, is when I'm stuck, for instance, in a place where there's too much grief, or I'm wrestling with too much heaviness.
Mm.
That's not where I want to be. I want to be kind of moving between, back and forth,
Sort of
very oceanic.
balanced. I mean, I was
Yeah.
thinking about, the 9/11 installation and trying to imagine what that must have been like for you.
It was, that's a very magical story. You want to hear the story?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so that was, just giving a shout out to the organization Reimagine, because they
Hmm.
were the ones that worked with the 9/11 Memorial Foundation to make it happen. We were the first um, workshop to be down there to actually make art out of the place itself. They don't even let you walk on the grass, let alone creating art out of the nature down there. So we were really pleased by that. But anyway, we had hundreds and hundreds of people participating in creating altars to remember 9/11 and make meaning with that. And the grounds people there were so kind. They spent weeks collecting material from the only surviving tree that survived that day. It's actually, they
Oh,
refer to it as the survivor tree.
oh.
And so we were working with material from the land there, and we were starting to create our altars. And this guy comes in, comes up right up to me, and there's hundreds of people, and he says, "What are you doing? What are you guys doing?" And I said, "Oh, we're making these things called altars, and they're really maps. They're really ways of making meaning with what happened here, and we're making it from the land itself." And he said, "Can I participate?" And I said, "Sure, everyone's welcome. You can definitely participate." So at the end, we all stood in like a humongous circle with all of these altars in the center of the circle. And we had a microphone that we passed around just to share some of our experiences. And this guy takes the microphone. He's the last one to go. And he says, I really don't know what's happening here. I just came on a whim. He said, I was here on 9/11 in this building. And he said, and I came down to smoke a cigarette, and that cigarette saved my life. And he said, I spent, 6, 8 weeks down here after the buildings fell, pulling out friends and trying to rescue people. And he said, and because I was down here during that time, I developed lung cancer. And he said, and I fought the lung cancer for years and years. And he said, I found out yesterday that my lung cancer went into remission and I'm cancer free for the first time. And he said, and I came down here to give thanks and to remember my friends. And he said, and I brought along a piece of the building. And he said, so I want you to see what I made. And he points down, and he made this beautiful morning altar that looked like an eye. And it had rose petaled eyelashes. It had sticks as the outer edge of the eyelid. And it had this piece of the building as the center of the eye. And he said, I made this eye out of the roses that people left for my friends here, and out of the sticks from the survivor tree. And he said, in the center of the eye is the building. And he said, I made an eye because I see it as all of the people that died here looking back at us with gratitude for remembering their lives. And that was a precious story of someone who had not had any experience with what we were doing, could jump right in and make something profoundly meaningful out of the place itself, and tell the story of the people he lost, but remember them in beauty.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That is really profound.
Mm. Yeah.
I appreciate you telling that story. It's really, really beautiful. I think about so many people looking for purpose and meaning now, and it certainly sounds like you found yours.
Yeah. More like a calling, answering the call.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's even a little bit more aggressive than that, because this pulled me out of a totally different career and into, I said yes to it, but this is a very, my parents would never have encouraged me to walk down this path.
Mm-hmm.
I basically created my own path, my own career. But there's something, it impacted my life so profoundly.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw how it impacts other people. And so I had to give myself to it.
Mm-hmm. I was experiencing some very deep grief many years ago, and what I used to do, I'm a knitter, and I walk
Mhm.
the woods trails a lot because I'm in upstate New York. We have beautiful trails. I have dogs. And what I used to do is take a piece of yarn, and much of this yarn was hand painted, and just wrap the yarn around the tree and just tie it. And I think that was kind of my version of what you're doing. And I couldn't put into words why that was somehow helpful or, but it seemed to be some kind of anchor or some kind of just honoring or seeing or, connecting with these trees. And then I would thank the trees for allowing me to do that. So I just am very resonating with your work.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, symbolism is very, very important to being a human being. We have to we make meaning out of symbols. We have deeper understanding when we work with symbolism. And sometimes it's not rational. And that's the thing about ritual. It's not rational. We do things that to a rational mind makes absolutely no sense. You know, but there's profound emotional meaning. There's a resonance to it on a much deeper level. It hits us. It's even more profound than a psychological level. It hits us on a soul level, and
Yes,
there's no words needed for that.
Right.
There's no explanation.
I completely agree with that. That it's something it's just unspoken.
Yeah.
I so appreciate you speaking with me today. The stories
Nicole.
were absolutely magnificent. Where can people find out more about you, your work, your trainings, all of the good stuff?
Sure. Morningaltars.com. Morning like this morning, and altars with an Altars. And we just, as I said earlier, we just launched our third cohort of our teacher training. We've graduated about 200 people from about 15 different countries, which is amazing. And then, so morningaltars.com is how you can find out about upcoming trainings and intensives and workshops that I do. I'm also very active on Instagram and Facebook, and it's the same handle, Morning Altars. And honestly, the thing I'm very proud of these days is that I give my soul to my newsletters. I'm not writing schlock. I'm really storytelling and making meaning. And so when I meet a lot of my fans, one of the first things I often hear is thank you so much for your newsletter. It's how I start my day in the morning. And so I'm very proud of that as well as my writing. But yeah, I'd say website and social media. Those are the ways to stay in touch with me.
And I do get your newsletters, and it almost feels like you're writing, it's a personal note just to me or just to each person. It has a real thoughtful feel to it. It's not schlock. It's not like a MailChimp template.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's quite beautiful.
I care deeply, and this is how I express that. So,
Best of luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. If you like the podcast, please share it with some of your friends.
Our music is courtesy of Judy Banker, who was a previous guest on the show. Find out more at judybanker.com. And our technical director is Stephen Litweiler. Hello, Zesties. Well, many of you know that I've been a psychotherapist for more than 30 years, and I'm an expert in healthy aging. But what you might not know is that I'm also a midlife coach, and I help women like you clarify and design the life you want to live in your second half. A life that's vibrant and feels uniquely like you. Maybe you've spent your entire life caring for others in one way or another, and you're a bit stuck with how to move forward in this new phase of your life. Or maybe you're considering a career change or other big life transition. Or maybe you're in the middle of a life change you didn't see coming. You may be asking yourself questions like, who am I now? And how do I build a new kind of life for myself? Or how do I make the most of the time I have left? This stage in our lives is the perfect time to pause, recalibrate, and reassess where our life is heading and ask ourselves what deserves our precious time. Now is the time to focus on what brings you joy and a sense of deep, calm contentment. I love helping women discover who they are in addition to being caregivers. After our sessions, you will have a clear plan for making your life more vibrant and deeply satisfying. You will feel a sense of control because you will be making choices that are perfect for you. And you will feel more confident because you will have an individualized blueprint to follow. And because you're a Zestful Aging podcast listener, I'm offering a special package deal. Contact me at zestfulaging.com right through my contact link. Time is truly precious, and there's no time to waste.
And stay tuned next week for another interview with a fascinating and inspiring guest.